All right, strap yourselves in because we are going deep on geopolitics today.
Oh, yeah.
We're diving into this really interesting interview with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Sounds good.
He was recently on Fox News, and let me tell you, he did not hold back.
Oh, really?
It was a wild ride. We're talking Panama Canal. We're talking USAI reform, international hotspots.
Wow.
He covered it all.
It's fascinating to hear how he views America's place on the world stage, right?
Yeah, and all the challenges he sees.
Right.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
Starting with the Panama Canal.
All right.
Rubio seemed really concerned about China's influence there.
Uh-huh.
He even mentioned seeing a Hong Kong vessel just kind of loitering near the entrance.
Interesting.
Can you give us some context here?
Well, the Panama Canal, it's a major artery for global trade.
Right.
And historically, it's been a huge U.S. interest.
Yeah, didn't the U.S. help build it?
Exactly.
Like way back in the early 1900s?
Yeah, beginning of the 20th century.
And for a long time, the U.S. controlled the whole canal zone, right?
Right.
But what changed?
So in 1977, the U.S. signed a treaty with Panama agreeing to hand over control by the year 2000.
So they don't control it anymore?
Nope.
So what's Rubio worried about?
Well, he's concerned that China, with its growing economic presence in Panama, especially around the canal, that it could actually end up controlling things in a way that violates the treaty.
Interesting.
He used the phrase effective control.
Right.
Like China might be gaining influence in ways no one saw coming back when the treaty was signed.
And he wasn't happy about it?
Not at all.
Did he say anything about how the U.S. might react to this?
Well, he didn't mention any specific actions. But he did say that the U.S. is watching everything very closely and will absolutely step in to protect its interests.
If it has to.
Yeah.
So this is pretty serious stuff.
Definitely.
It's interesting, though. I read that Panama actually pulled out of China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Oh, yeah.
Shortly after Rubio's comments.
They did.
What do you make of that?
Well, the Belt and Road Initiative.
Right.
It's a huge global infrastructure project led by China.
I mean, some people see it as China just trying to expand its power, right?
Well, I did say that.
So when Panama joined back in 2017, it raised some eyebrows.
Definitely.
So them backing out now could be a way of reassuring the U.S. that they're not getting too chummy with China.
I think so.
So is this whole Panama Canal drama over?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Rubio said he hopes for a resolution where the canal stays open to everyone, but without China having too much sway.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
For sure.
All right, let's switch gears completely.
Okay.
Rubio really went after USAID in this interview.
Yeah, the U.S. Agency for International Development.
He called it a global charity.
Oh, wow.
And said it's completely lost sight of U.S. interests.
He's been critical of them before, hasn't he?
Yeah, this wasn't the first time. It seems like he's really frustrated with what he sees as a disconnect between USAID's actions and actual U.S. foreign policy goals.
He has a point.
He even brought up Elon Musk's criticism of USAID's.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
Musk called USAID a criminal organization.
Wow.
And said it should be shut down.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, Rubio didn't go that far.
Okay.
But he definitely shares some of Musk's concerns about the way the agency operates.
Interesting.
So what exactly is Rubio accusing USAID of doing?
Well, he says they've become too focused on just giving aid and development projects without even considering how those projects align with bigger U.S. interests. He says they ignore complaints from U.S. embassies.
Wow.
They don't cooperate with the State Department.
It's like they're doing their own thing.
Yeah.
He even said something about USAID basically saying they don't work for anyone.
What?
Yeah, he quoted someone from USAID as saying, we don't work for anyone. We work for ourselves.
That's a bold statement.
Right. And that's the heart of Rubio's frustration.
Yeah.
He sees it as proof that the agency has gone rogue, operating on its own.
Right.
With a level of independence that he just finds totally unacceptable.
Wow. So what's he doing about it?
Well, he's actually taken some pretty drastic steps.
Oh, really? Like what?
He's put a pause on foreign aid. And now any USAID program has to get a waiver from Rubio personally if it wants to continue.
Oh, wow. So he's trying to take back control.
Yeah, it seems like he wants to make sure that U.S. foreign aid is actually serving, U.S. interests.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
He's saying that U.S. foreign aid can't just be about charity.
Right.
It has to be a strategic tool that actually helps America.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got this drama at the Panama Canal.
Right.
And a power struggle over U.S. aid.
Mm.
What else did Rubio talk about?
Well, he also had some things to say about trade tensions with Canada and Mexico.
Ah, yes, the tariffs.
Yeah.
He was a big fan of those, right?
He was.
And he had very specific reasons for it.
Uh-huh.
For Canada.
Uh-huh.
He argued that their trade practices are just not fair.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to their policies that make it hard for American companies to compete.
Okay.
He also brought up the issue of fentanyl coming from Canada.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He was pretty concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
And he suggested that Canada isn't doing enough to stop it.
I see.
And he tied this all back to this idea of reciprocity in trade.
Okay.
Basically, he believes that trade has to be fair and balanced.
Right.
And if one country isn't playing by the rules, the other country has a right to push back.
Right.
So that was Canada.
Yeah.
And then there's Mexico.
Okay.
I'm guessing the cartels came up.
They did.
What did he say?
Well, he's very concerned about the power of the cartels in Mexico.
Yeah.
Especially in the north.
Right.
He sees them as a security threat.
Of course.
Not just to Mexico, but to the U.S. too.
Absolutely.
And he sees the tariffs as a way to pressure Mexico to take action against the cartels.
Interesting.
And to do more to secure the border.
It's all very interconnected, isn't it?
It really is.
Trade, security, foreign policy.
Yeah.
It's all part of the same puzzle.
Exactly. And that's what makes Rubio's perspective so fascinating. He's trying to look at all of these pieces together and figure out how the U.S. should engage with the world.
Well, we've only scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Next, we're going to dive into what Rubio had to say about some major international hotspots.
Right.
Venezuela, Iran, and Cuba.
Okay.
Stay tuned because it's about to get even more intense.
Can't wait.
Okay, so we covered the Panama Canal, U.S. foreign aid, and trade tensions.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some really volatile places.
Okay.
Rubio had a lot to say about Venezuela, Iran, and Cuba. What stood out to you about his comments?
It's pretty clear he sees these countries as huge challenges to U.S. interests and security.
Yeah.
He didn't mince words when it came to the regimes in power.
Yeah. Definitely not. Let's start with Venezuela.
Okay.
A country that's been struggling for years now.
Yeah.
What was Rubio's take on the situation there?
He basically said that Venezuela under Maduro is a complete disaster.
Right.
That the regime has wrecked their economy and driven the people into poverty and despair.
But there have been some developments recently, right?
Yeah.
Like they released those American prisoners.
Right.
And Maduro even agreed to take back criminals who had been deported from the U.S.
Yeah, he did.
Did Rubio talk about that at all?
Oh, he addressed it directly. He sees those moves as tactical, maybe designed to ease the pressure from the U.S. And gain a little legitimacy.
Yeah.
He's pretty skeptical, though, about whether this is a sign that Maduro is actually changing his ways.
So he doesn't think this means Maduro's turning over a new leaf?
Not really. He suggested that Maduro is probably just responding to President Trump. And Trump's willingness to take action. He seemed to be implying that Maduro wouldn't make these concessions to a leader he saw as weaker.
I see.
Or less likely to follow through.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Rubio's saying strength is key.
Exactly.
When dealing with someone like Maduro.
That was a key takeaway for me.
Yeah.
Rubio believes diplomacy needs to be backed up by real force and a willingness to use it.
If you have to.
Exactly. You have to show them you're serious.
Right.
He seems to be arguing for a foreign policy that's strong militarily, but also understands how our adversaries think.
Right, how they operate.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Iran.
Right.
The U.S. and Iran, they've had tension for decades.
Yeah.
Did Rubio offer any insights into how he views that relationship?
He did not hold back.
Okay.
He sees the Iranian regime as a major threat to U.S. interests and to stability in the region. He really stressed the need to keep up the pressure on them to stop their nuclear ambitions and to stop them from supporting terrorism.
He specifically called out groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis.
Yeah, he did. He said Iran is actively making the Middle East less stable by giving those groups money and weapons.
And he sees this as part of a larger Iranian strategy to weaken the U.S. in the region.
Exactly.
So what's his solution?
Well, he advocated for a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
You need sanctions.
Right.
And a strong military to deter them.
Okay.
He believes the U.S. needs to show strength and make it clear that any aggression against the U.S. or its allies will be met with force.
Okay.
He also talked about working with our allies to counter Iran's influence.
It's interesting. It seems like Rubio sees a pattern here.
Yeah.
Whether it's China, Venezuela, or Iran, he wants the U.S. to be more assertive, prioritize American strength, and be ready to use it to protect U.S. interests.
Yeah, you're right. There's a consistent theme. He's worried about American interests being challenged.
Right.
And he thinks we need to defend them with everything we have.
Okay, now on to Cuba.
Okay.
Rubio's Cuban-American, so this must be personal for him.
Definitely.
What did he say about it?
He condemned the Cuban regime in very strong terms.
Okay.
He said it's a disaster that's destroyed the country and is still oppressing its people.
Right.
He's also worried about Cuba's ties with other U.S. adversaries.
Okay, like who?
China, Russia, and Iran.
He even claimed that Cuba invited China to open spy bases on the island.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Right. He sees Cuba as a potential base for China.
Yeah.
Right here in the Western Hemisphere. Obviously, that's a huge concern for the U.S.
Of course.
He argued that Cuba is actively trying to hurt U.S. interests.
Right.
By working with countries that are hostile to us.
Yeah.
So what does Rubio think should be done about Cuba?
He thinks we need a hardline approach. Keep the embargo in place. Isolate them diplomatically and economically.
Right.
He doesn't see any point in engaging with them until they change.
Until they make some serious reforms.
Yeah. And improve their human rights record.
This is very different from the Obama administration.
Oh, yeah.
They tried to normalize relations.
Right.
Rubio's a big critic of that.
He is. He thinks engaging with the regime just makes them stronger.
Okay.
And it doesn't help the Cuban people at all.
So we've got drama at the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
A battle over USA trade wars.
Right.
And now we're talking about these international hotspots.
Yeah.
Venezuela, Iran, and Cuba.
A lot going on.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's so insightful.
Yeah.
It gives you a real sense of how Rubio sees the world.
It really does.
And how he thinks U.S. foreign policy should work.
And it seems like a big part of that is this focus on strength.
Absolutely.
And being willing to use American power to defend our interests.
Exactly. Whether you agree with him or not,
yeah,
his views are important.
Right. And they'll likely have a big impact on U.S. policy in the years to come.
Well, we've covered a lot, but we're not done yet.
Oh.
We still have to talk about China.
Right.
And this is where Rubio lays out his big strategic vision.
Okay.
Stay with us for the final part of our deep dive. All right, we've talked about the Panama Canal, USAID, trade wars, and some of the most volatile regions in the world.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about China.
Okay.
Rubio spent a lot of time in this interview discussing China's rise.
Right.
And what he sees as a threat to the U.S.
This is where his strategic thinking really comes through.
Yeah.
He gets that China is a growing power with global ambitions.
Yeah.
He admits the U.S.-China relationship is complicated. It's both competitive and we depend on each other.
It's true. He seemed particularly concerned about how much the U.S. depends on China.
Yeah.
For certain resources and industries.
Right. He talked about how reliant we've become on China for everything. From rare earth minerals to medicine.
It's true. He said China could use that to pressure us economically and politically.
So it's not just about military power. Yeah. It's about economic dominance, too.
Exactly.
He actually used the word dominate.
He did.
He's worried that China wants to run the whole global system.
That's his concern.
Did he talk about what the U.S. should do?
He did. He thinks we need a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
Rebuild our manufacturing.
Right.
Stop depending on China so much. Invest in new technologies where China is ahead.
And work with other countries.
Right. Strengthen our alliances.
With countries that are also worried about China.
Exactly.
This sounds like a huge shift in how the U.S. approaches foreign policy.
It is. He's saying we need to wake up, stop being complacent, and be more strategic and assertive.
So basically, get serious about dealing with China.
Yes.
He called it the defining challenge of the 21st century.
He did.
This competition with China.
Yeah.
That will shape everything for generations to come.
It's a big deal.
He even said the future of the 21st century depends on the U.S.-China relationship.
It's a pretty stark statement.
It is. It really shows how seriously he takes this.
Right. He thinks the U.S. needs to wake up, recognize the threat, and take action.
To protect our interests and our position in the world.
Exactly.
It's amazing how he ties everything together.
Yeah.
Panama Canal.
Right.
USA at Tea.
All of it.
And the challenge from China.
It's all part of his view on American strength.
It's a cohesive worldview.
Yeah.
American leadership.
Yeah.
A strong military, economic independence, strategic alliances.
That's his vision for U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
You may not agree with everything he says.
True.
But his perspective is definitely important.
Definitely.
He's shaping U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
His ideas will have an impact on how the U.S. interacts with the world.
His interview gives us a glimpse into how someone at that level is thinking about the challenges facing the U.S. It's a conversation worth having.
Definitely.
We need to discuss these issues.
Yes.
Think critically.
Absolutely.
About the challenges.
Yeah.
And opportunities ahead.
Rubio's interview is a call to action.
Yeah.
He's saying we need to recognize the challenges, especially from China.
Right.
And be more strategic and assertive in our foreign policy.
He thinks the stakes are really high.
Yeah.
The decisions we make now will determine the future.
Of the U.S. and our place in the world.
It's a perspective that will definitely spark debate.
Absolutely.
That's what we're here for.
Right.
To dive deep into these complex issues.
Yeah.
And give you the information you need.
To understand the world.
It's a complex world.
It is.
And it's changing fast.
All the more reason to engage with these topics.
Right.
And to think critically about them.
Exactly. Well, that was quite a ride.
Oh, yeah.
We covered a lot of ground.
I did.
From Panama to Venezuela.
From trade wars to China.
It's clear Secretary Rubio has a very specific vision for America's role in the world.
He does, and it's a vision that's going to be debated for years to come.
It definitely will, and we'll be here to break it all down for you.
We're here to make things clear.
Subscribe to our podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
We'll see you next time.
We are here to make things clear.